Hi, my name is SRIDHAR Rangayan. I'm the Festival Director of KASHISH Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having its 12th edition right now. This is KASHISH 2021. We are having a filmmaker Q&A with the wonderful filmmakers Patrick Sammon and Bennett Singer, of the filmmakers of the film Cured.
If you were gay in those days, you were diagnosed as suffering from a mental disorder. In the early 1970s, there was this growing rebellion against psychiatry, and we wanted to remove homosexuality from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
So Cured was a fantastic documentary from USA, which was facilitated by Film Collaborative, our dear friend, Jeffrey Winter. So thank you for being with us. And I just want to introduce both of you. You have been pioneers in the work we have been doing. So Patrick Sammon is a co-producer and director of Cured, a resident of Washington, D.C. He previously served as creator and executive producer of Codebreaker, an award-winning drama documentary about the life and legacy of gay British codebreaker Alan Turing that reached more than 3 million viewers worldwide. Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And Bennett Singer is a Los Angeles-based filmmaker and the other co-director and co-producer of Cured. Bennett's previous credits include co-directing Electoral Dysfunction, an award-winning film on voting rights, and Brother Outsider, a documentary portrait of the gay civil rights activist Bayard Rustin that premiered at Sundance and won more than 20 national prizes, including the GLAAD Media Award and the Audience Award at New Fest. Congratulations on that. I just want to start off by asking a few questions. So what was the catalyst for Cured? Why did you want to tell this story, Patrick?
In 2014, a friend of mine here in Washington, D.C., who runs an LGBT history organization, wrote a film treatment about the life of Frank Kameny, and he had me read it. And one of the scenes was the 1972 APA annual meeting where Dr. Anonymous, the man in the mask, John Fryer, testifies to APA members about what it was like to be a gay psychiatrist. I was familiar with this story, having read about it in LGBT history books, but it sort of jumped off the page at me as something that would make a really incredible documentary. I was wrapping up distribution efforts on Codebreaker and really thought it would be an amazing story to tell. So I recruited my friend and now colleague, Bennett Singer, to join me on this odyssey. And it's really been incredibly satisfying to tell this story. And as we jumped into the research for the film before we started doing interviews, it really surprised us how central this moment was. Of course, we felt like we should have known more about it and how critical it was. But as long as we were classified as being mentally ill, then business and government were going to use that as an excuse to discriminate. So it had to be the first domino to fall in the path to more equal treatment of LGBT people. So we weren't sure how many people would still be around who were part of this story. So our priority early on became finding the participants and then interviewing as many people as we could. And it's just been really humbling and to be able to talk to all of these activists and then tell this story.
Wow, that's really something. Bennett, like you people shot the film for 5 years. That's a long period of time. And I'm sure like you had to travel a lot of in breadth and width of America to film these wonderful activists. So what has been your experiences making this film, producing it? And more importantly, in India, we do not seem to have respect for archives at all. We don't yet have an LGBTQ archive. I'm really wanting to set it up, but I just hope that this younger generation will preserve the LGBTQ material. And I'm really surprised that there's a huge, you managed to get to the huge archives across USA and brought out these beautiful pictures and videos and the clips. And so how is the process for you?
Yeah, the archival search, even in the US, there are some archives specifically dedicated to preserving LGBTQ history, but they're few and far between, and they helped us, but they certainly weren't the only source for our materials. So it was quite a gamut, a spectrum of different kinds of archival resources. Certainly footage archives like the news networks, the Library of Congress in the US, regional historical societies, and and then some of the specific LGBT archives. But one of the most meaningful and helpful discoveries came when we were looking through the papers of John Fryer, also known as Dr. Anonymous, as Patrick mentioned, one of the real inspirations for telling the whole story. He died about 20 years ago, and several hundred of his boxes are now at a archive in Pennsylvania. But Patrick and I spent about a week going through that collection and finding photos and this diary entry, his handwritten speech. But there was also a box pretty unlabeled and unclear. It was labeled as miscellaneous audio, and there were a bunch of different audio cassettes inside that box. And I sat there with a cassette recorder listening to the different tapes and was stunned and really happy to find a recording of his speech from 1972. Where we also found an episode of the David Susskind Show where 7 out lesbians were part of a panel, actually the very first time that out lesbians had been on national television. And based on that, we tracked down one of the speakers who had been on that panel, Reverend Magora Kennedy, who had been at Stonewall and was such a tireless activist and is now 82 and has been, working with us on the outreach and panels for the film.
It's also just to highlight the help we received from the American Psychiatric Association. Some organizations, when they have an embarrassing history or a shameful history, they want to sweep it under the rug. And credit to the APA that they opened up their archives, and they would say they're not really that well organized yet. They're working on it. So they weren't necessarily sure what we would find. And so a lot of the photos in there and the convention programs were really part of the mix that came from the APA. And the APA Foundation also has provided us a generous grant to help with our outreach and engagement campaign. Thankfully, our archival producers, Mridhu Chandra and Luann Jones, were so central to the work that we did and finding some of the things that Bennett talked about. And, it really kind of stitched together these different elements and filled in pieces of the puzzle.
Discovering Dr. H actual video, the audio tape was such a huge discovery. That really set the film completely, suddenly took a, in Bollywood language, we say the film took a turn, that's the way we say that, Yeah. So that really was amazing just to hear his voice and his voice at the conference, Another thing which I also noticed, Reverend Major Kennedy comes across as such a spunky woman. How were your encounters with her? Was she all over the place? Was she focused? She's amazing. She brings so much of energy into the film. Any of you want to share your thoughts about Reverend Major Kennedy?
Well, I totally agree. She has so much energy. Whenever we interact with her, it's like a jolt of adrenaline. What I've been so impressed with is just her ability to remain optimistic. She has seen a lot of struggle, and as a 14-year-old, she had that really brutal choice that her mother gave her of go to a mental institution to be cured or marry a man, and she did choose to marry a man. But she talks about being angry and really working through that understandable anger, but ultimately really dedicating her life to the idea that social change, systemic, lasting social change is possible. And she, I think, has embodied that and really continues to speak out on behalf of trans people of color who are at such disproportionate risk of violence and mistreated both socially and politically and culturally and with such stigma. So she is indeed continuing to fight the fight, and we are very fortunate that she has joined this project.
For me, another person who I was really happy to see was K. Lihuson, a partner of Barbara Gittings. I heard of Barbara Gittings because my film Breaking Free won the Barbara Gittings Human Rights Award at Philadelphia QFlex, QFlex
Wow.
Philadelphia. And I didn't really know too much about Barbara Gittings, but I'd actually researched who she was when I received the award. But just seeing some of her snippets on camera and hearing a partner was an amazing experience. She's again, K. Lihuson was an amazing discovery for me, hearing her speak.
Well, it is unfortunately, I'm sad to say that Kay actually passed away in May of 2021.
Oh boy.
It was really so powerful to have her participate in this film, and we're so grateful to her and grateful to Kay and Barbara for the contributions they made to the LGBT equality movement, and they were really central to this fight with the APA. And Kay really hadn't done many interviews with anyone over the years, so we were just really grateful that she decided to participate in this film. Interviewed her over 2 days at her retirement home in Pennsylvania. Early last year, we were able to visit her and show her a nearly complete cut of the film. And it was so fantastic that she approved of what we had created. And, there's a real lasting legacy in her life, both the book, Gay Crusaders from 1972, which is a groundbreaking book about the activists at that time. And then she was a photojournalist, and we used the photos from her in our film, notably the 1972 APA panel discussion that I spoke about, where she took those photos. It was her idea to invite a gay psychiatrist to participate in the panel, but B, she was, understood the power of images. And ultimately, if that event happened without the photos, I don't even know if we'd be talking about it or know about it, but those images are so iconic. We're so sad that Kay is gone, but also really just humbled and grateful that she participated in this film, and we have her story to include.
That actually, I've been really sad to hear about Kay passing away. She and Barbara really stood like a giant rock for so many years and served the community. Basically, you used all these activists to tell the stories instead of a narrator. Usually, like, we try to kind of historical documentaries, we try to have a narrator. And my own documentary, Breaking Free, I had to use myself as a narrator. I didn't want to be the film, but there was no other way to stitch the 7 years of which I shot the film together. So how did you manage to navigate this whole non-narrator kind of format?
We did have a lot of discussions about that with our editor, and I guess we were pretty determined from the beginning to see if we could tell the story without a narrator. But then there was also the related question of whether we would need historical experts on camera. But ultimately, we decided that the only people who would be on camera would be first-person eyewitnesses who took part in these events. And some of those witnesses were able to talk about the history of psychiatry and broader social points. It took a long time, and a lot of the credit goes to our editor, Steve Hefner, who really was tireless and determined to make it work without a narrator. I think, when that is possible, and it isn't always possible, but there is a certain immediacy and a certain connection that viewers have more directly, I think, with the storytelling and the flow of the narrative. So I'm hoping that people feel that the storytelling is clear and accessible.
Sometimes a narrator keeps talking about it and you switch off. Here you can't switch off because actual people talking, and that's what makes this documentary much more beautiful. I just want to come back to the topic of the film. So how important was it to get homosexuality removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM, that lists mental disorders? How did it change the LGBT politics at that time?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of examples about what the impact of this was, and Bennett can chime in as well. I know that, for example, you couldn't be a federal government employee in the United States if you were gay or lesbian. And, Frank Kameny was one of the people pushing what was called the Civil Service Commission at the time to push them to allow gay and lesbian federal employees. But the Civil Service Commission kept telling Dr. Kameny that, you're mentally ill. So that's one specific example of how this classification had an impact on the lives of gay and lesbian people. And aside from the sort of discrimination that it led to, one of the things that was eye-opening to me was learning the sort of effect that it had on the psyche of gay and lesbian people at that time period. A number of the storytellers talked about how as teenagers, they went to the library as they were trying to process who they were, to learn about who they were and understand what homosexuality was. And every book in the library told them that they were mentally ill. And so that had an effect. Even Ron Gold, who's such a dynamic and amazing activist, and we were really surprised to hear him say that even he himself felt worse about himself, this sort of internalized homophobia that this mental illness label caused. And so its removal, particularly for, 15 and 16-year-olds at the time in the early 70s, they were able to come out of the closet without that stigma. Certainly it was still very hard at that time, but it allowed for another generation of activists to not have that sort of mark on them, that they felt bad about themselves in that way. And so that was really pivotal.
I would just add, I think the APA's decision had such a effect worldwide. So there was the immediate changes in the US, but beyond that, there was a ripple effect. It wasn't actually until 1990, however, that the World Health Organization took homosexuality out of its international classification of diseases. There was a delay in that process, but I do think the APA decision really had a global ripple effect.
Definitely, policy changes or classifications like this definitely impact the lives of LGBTQ people. Like in 2018, finally, Section 377, which decriminalized homosexuality in India, was lifted. Was read down, and that was a huge mental. I would say mental barrier lifted for younger LGBTQ people, that they're not criminal anymore and they can live their life. So of course, social acceptance is yet to come by in India. It's still a long way. Families, we need to sensitize families. We need to sensitize religious leaders who make a big impact in Indian society. In India, we are still just about beginning to talk about mental health right now. Over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, the conversation started that going to, I would say, mental health professional is not something to be scared of. People still feel a stigma about it. So what do you think of the mental health domain in US at this point of time, especially to LGBTQ individuals?
Well, I think it's a sea change from what it was obviously back in the early 70s. And I think the clearest symbol of the change is that the APA is now led by an openly gay man. Its medical director and CEO, Dr. Saul Levin. And that's symbolic, but it's also has an effect on that organization. And, the key thing is the whole medical establishment back in the early 70s was the enemy of LGBT people. And now they're the ally. And that's so essential that thinking about mental health care for LGBT people is central and a priority for these organizations, the APA and the National Alliance on Mental Illness and other organizations. And they're working they all openly gay LGBT psychiatrists are now welcomed into the industry, and there are a lot to provide mental health care. And was in a panel discussion last night with a mental health organization in Pennsylvania, and they were talking about the outreach they have to help LGBT young people who need mental health assistance.
Yeah, but actually in India, still, I don't think the ideas percolated among the psychiatrist association in India. I know they know that it's not a mental illness anymore, but they still treat it as a mental illness even today. I mean, I would say a majority of psychiatrists in India are not educated, unfortunately, about this particular aspect regarding homosexuality, and they're still sending people to quacks, and even they recommend aversion therapy, which is really sad. Wow. Even now, that's really something which needs to be banned and abolished. But still, in US, is aversion therapy banned in all the states or not yet?
Conversion therapy, no, therapy. Yeah, it's such a good point. 20 states have banned it for minors, but 30, the majority, still allow it, and that is an ongoing issue and an ongoing movement that we're hoping the film can be actually part of educating people, and the film has already been used as a resource exactly in that effort by groups like Born Perfect and the Trevor Project, which has a campaign called 50 Bills for 50 States, exactly aimed at eliminating and banning conversion therapy. And as I understand it, 5 countries around the world have already instituted national bans, but it's a slow process, and there's a debate, as you probably know right now, in the UK as of May of 2021 to institute a national ban in the UK, which would be, I think, huge and would really lead other countries to follow suit. So we're hopeful that the pledge to ban conversion therapy in the UK, which Boris Johnson is on record as saying should be banned. And the Queen actually, or has also gone on record as saying this needs to happen. So now it's a matter of implementing that pledge. And I think once that happens, assuming it does, there will be quite a follow-on effect where other countries.
For me, what was disconcerting right in the beginning of the film was all this very, very homophobic kind of voices. Thankfully, in India, we don't have that kind of a public homophobia. Everything is homophobia is still underground. I mean, we don't have public protest decrying homosexuality, thankfully, yet, But I don't know whether because with visibility might come more challenges. We don't know, hopefully not. But I mean, that was really too much for me to just see the kind of hatred people have towards homosexuals, in the past, and where does it come from? You always wonder, where does this hatred come from?
Two things. Number one, a fear of the unknown, I think was part of what was at play. And also, I think the religiosity of some people, and in this country, the forces opposed to LGBT equality back in the early 70s and to this day are typically religiously conservative Christians. And they, evangelical Christians, not all, but I'm saying the large forces that are opposed to many efforts for equality. And so that's, I think, the biggest element that has made the sort of sustained resistance to equality here in this country. But the positive thing is that progress is being made on these issues, even with young people of faith. Young evangelical Christians are not like their parents. They're, for the most part, much more supportive of LGBT equality. So that's very heartening. But looking back to those images in the film, we wanted to paint an accurate picture of what it was like. And it is jarring to start the film that way and very difficult to watch. But we wanted to do justice to the people who suffered through that period of time and had to live with the hostility and discrimination they faced.
So, I mean, what lessons do you hope viewers will take away from this film? Why is the story relevant? We already discussed quite a bit of it, but if you want to throw some light, Patrick, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, well, we're hoping that this can inspire activists working for social change across the globe, not just on LGBT issues, but on a range of social change issues. Because what I think this film shows is that creating systemic change is possible. Success is possible. One of the things we wanted to show in the film was the outcome wasn't inevitable. And the people who challenged the APA faced incredibly daunting odds. Historians told us probably that 95% of APA members in the late 60s would have thought that homosexuality was a mental illness. And that didn't stop Frank Kameny and the other activists to say, you know what, that's not acceptable. And so they challenged this seemingly insurmountable force, this organization, and persevered. And I think there's a really inspiring lesson from that I think all of us can take in confronting the challenges that we still face today in bringing about a more just world. I
would add to, that I agree that's sort of the fundamental message of the film. And part of what led to that change was the indispensable role of allies. It wasn't just LGBT people seeing the light and standing up, but also people beyond the LGBTQ community who, as I, saw this as a human rights issue and saw this as a matter of science, which we haven't talked that much about. But I think at the root of the activist argument was this is, the claims, the scientific claims that homosexuality is a pathology were based on shoddy pseudoscience, and there was another body of scientific evidence that, based on Kinsey and Evelyn Hooker and other researchers and scientists who said homosexuality is a natural and normal variation of sexual expression. And so to see allies and psychiatrists and mental health professionals actually think about those competing views and come down on the side of what I would say was reason and valid, legitimate scientific evidence was very heartening. And I think especially today, when there are other debates about what is a fact and where does science what is scientifically valid and what is scientifically bogus. I think that lesson also about truth and reason, and also the power of allies to help bring about social change are other takeaways.
And I just hope that your film will carry on this movement far and wide, not just in US, but across the world. So where all have your film been shown, and what's been the reactions to the film? No?
We rolled it out initially at Outfest, which is the LGBT film festival in LA, and it's been shown at quite a number of LGBT festivals, but also documentary festivals and general film festivals worldwide, including quite a number in Canada and Latin America and Europe and a couple in Asia. So we're continuing on the festival circuit. There are various broadcasts in the works. I would love to have a broadcast in India, and I don't know how realistic that is, but that is underway, and various countries are acquiring the film for broadcasts. And in the US, it will be broadcast nationally on our public television, meaning that millions of people, PBS, yes. So millions of people will be able to tune into it for free, which is, I think, a very healthy opportunity. After the PBS broadcast, we will have the right to have it streaming in, we hope, internationally, iTunes included, and Amazon, we hope so, or Netflix in certain territories. So yes, people will have access to it in that way.
And what's your next projects? Are you both collaborating on a project, or you're two of you individually doing some exciting new projects?
No, I mean, there are I have other, sort of ideas in the file folder, but we're sort of focused with the outreach support. We're really going gangbusters, full steam ahead on distribution for this, and that'll really take us through the PBS broadcast. One of the exciting things is that FX has acquired the rights to potentially turn this into a 6-part scripted series. It's still a long shot that will happen, but Stephen Canals, the co-creator of Pose, is the writer of that project. So we're thrilled to be partnered with him and potentially have this be on the screen as a scripted narrative. So that would be a piece of the equation as well, about how to get this story more broadly in front
that's
of
awesome
people.
to hear that.
Yeah,
I hope it happens for sure.
It's really
That's
exciting.
awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It could be such a great story in the hands of talented screenwriters and luminous actors. So we're optimistic that will happen.
So thank you so much for joining this conversation, Q&A for the film Cured on Kashish 2021.
Well, Sridhar, I appreciate the opportunity to present Cured at your festival and bringing it to India and sharing this story, which really has a global message that I think can inspire everyone who sees it. So thank you for this opportunity.
So all of you who have been watching this on our social media handles, please type your questions here, and make sure that Patrick and Bennett would answer the questions on our YouTube or social media handles per se. So please type your thing, and please don't forget to register if you're not registered for Kashish 2021. There are 2 more weeks of exciting films happening. So please register. You can register on mumbaiquefas.com, and do continue to support Kashish 2021 with all your love and all your affection. Thanks a lot.